Well, Castlevania Dominus Collection was released last week. Released really out of nowhere. And when it was released, I saw Haunted Castle was going to be put back on this. Why was this concerning? Because it's a really crappy Castlevania game. So bad it doesn't even have the Castlevania name in it. I said it was the second worst Castlevania game a few years ago, and oh boy, they're revisiting and giving it a fresh coat of paint. There is not enough polish in the world to put on this turd to make it shiny. Then I got comments saying how wrong I was about the game and I should try it. So I decided, what the heck, I would get the game and at least try the remake. And you want to know something? Haunted Castle Revisited is actually kind of good. It's not perfect, but it's really good. And it made me revisit the original even. And you want to know something? I think I may have just given this game the wrong spot when I said it was the second worst Castlevania game ever. I may have deeply misunderstood it, may have given it unnecessary criticism, may not have appreciated what Haunted Castle brought to the table as much as I should have. Because it should have been number one on the worst Castlevania list. Everything in this game sucks more than a vampire with a case of chronic dry mouth. Everything in this game is meant to rob quarters out of people. 5-minute time limit, no matter how many quarters you enter to keep your health up, if the time runs out, you die. And it took $1.50 in quarters to keep Simon at full power. And that was in 1980s money, kids. That's $5 now when you're dealing with Bidenomics. And the cheap hits that just keep on coming, the less than accurate controls, the instant death traps, all of these are nothing but a big pile of bullcrap. Haunted Castle Revisited changes a lot. Konami created a home version of Haunted Castle, similar to their work on Turtles in Time or the NES version of Contra back in the day. They rebuilt the games to suit home players who might get frustrated with the arcade's quarter-popping difficulty. For example, you'll see the difference if you compare Turtles in Time, the arcade, to the SNES version in the Cowabunga collection. Haunted Castle Revisited is like the Super Nintendo version of Turtles in Time. Although talking about Haunted Castle here, I might be comparing it more towards Ubisoft Turtles in Time Reshelled if I was going to make the comparison. But you get the drift. The home version stands the test of time and it's just more fun to play at home where you don't have to worry about popping in the quarters. The story is the same setup from Haunted Castle. Dracula does what 1980s video games villains do and kidnaps Simon Belmont's bride, and he now has to rescue her. I like the changes in the intro though. He kidnaps her more like you'd think Dracula would, puts her under a spell and then just lifts her up and takes off with her. Simon powering up like a shonen protagonist is a little bit much though. Frieza! Wait a minute, I need Dracula! From the moment you start, you get the Haunted Castle inspiration. The graveyard does indeed feel like the graveyard you walked into on the first stage, but the enemies now appear in formations you can actually beat them. Candles, like the home version of Castlevania, appear everywhere. You can collect crystals to power up your whip, and the second one gives you a super whip that does a lot of damage. The stage layout, although similar, changes the bullcrap areas where you know you were going to take a hit. They're no longer there. For example, instead of doing this wall that's kind of like the Yellow Devil from Mega Man, except these are impossible to dodge, here you gotta dodge a few of these tombstones that fly out of the sky, followed up by whipping some zombies until the walls disappear and you can continue onward. This is so much more fun and easier than just dodging wall bricks that fly at you. Other things like these jumps here that in the original Haunted Castle could really trip you up if you accidentally fell down them, no longer really happens because the controls are so good and the platforms and where to go are now spelled out better. That said, it's still generous. If you fall into a pit, you just lose a bit of life rather than having to lose a life. The infamous scene in the original game where you can only run and let the bats hit you and forced to pop in another quarter before you fight Dracula, it's gone. You still have to pass a crumbling bridge, but it stops you, and then you have to deal with a flock of them, making for a much better end-of-game experience. The bosses, with the exception of one, which I'll get into again in the nitpick, are all done better. They now have patterns, and you can tell what they're doing and get out of the way. They have health bars, so you know how much damage they must take before being defeated. The whole thing is now kind of a pattern, kind of like a home video game console thing, and most of the bosses now are pretty fun. The feel of the game is great. It doesn't quite feel like classic Castlevania, and I will get into that in my nitpick section, but the controls are good. One of the mechanics is they took away the third level whip. Rather, if you grab 2 crystals, you get a sharp knife at the end of your whip for about 30 seconds, or until you get hit, and it does more damage and acts way faster than a regular whip. I enjoyed it. It's kind of like the fireball features they put in some other Castlevania, and it makes sense rather than have Simon pull out a sword instead. So what in the gameplay side do I have to nitpick about? Well, again, these are nitpicks, but they are there. This golem creature that you do have to fight as a boss needs to have a crystal on his head hit in order to open up so you can hit his heart. The problem is, unless you got an axe, you have to stand on his hand, and there's no way to know when a good time is to stand on that hand and jump. Like I said, one boss, it's a bit of a nitpick, but it's far from being a terrible boss experience. Nitpick 2 is a little bit deeper, but they did mess up Simon's jump a bit. Don't worry, it's in the player's favor, but hardcore classic Castlevania fans are going to notice. Basically, Simon can jump like he's Super Mario. You can control it back and forth, movements of his jump. This is different from classic Castlevania, where when you make a jump, you have to commit to it. Hopefully an update will give you that option for those who want a slightly harder game, because there are no jumps in this game that really need that level of control like you have in Super Mario Bros. Alright, to appreciate the new graphics, let's go back to the old graphics. Well, yes, you can argue these are better than the NES games because the sprites are bigger and the backgrounds have more details. I have to ask, are they really? I will take the basic NES sprites that move well over this. The backgrounds in some areas are just ugly and fail at what they're trying to convey. This is supposed to be the castle peeking out of the fog, but it looks just like lines, and the game's having graphical problems because of it. And then there's Simon's walk animation. I get what they were actually going here. He's in a castle full of monsters, so he's going to keep his hand on his weapon at all times. But they should have animated the weapon on the side that the player could see, because here it looks like the wedding reception consisted of all-you-can-eat Taco Bell buffet with Dairy Queen for dessert, and he's about to make a follow-up to Bloody Tears called Bloody Diarrhea. Here in the remake, Simon has a normal walking animation, and his updated sprite looks like an updated version of the original arcade, warts and all, just with better animation that kind of makes sense. Those backgrounds look like they convey the message they were trying to get across. The graveyard now looks like a graveyard at evening, with mountains in the background. While I do wish they added more fog effects when you do get to the castle scene in the second stage, the fog that Simon does see is far more believable than the lines, and it doesn't look like it has graphical issue. And this red sky now looks eerie rather than the game's just kind of broken. And the fact that the game now uses a 3D and a 2D game look for some of these backgrounds just makes everything pop. It looks terrific. Things like the clock tower also now have more detail as you go through it, and so does the dining hall. All of this looks like it's just so much better than the original game. And again, when the only criticism I can have for this game's graphics is that I wish they had more fog in the second stage. You know M2 nailed it. One of the things I can give the original Haunted Castle a small break for is its music doesn't suck. I mean, there is Castlevania games with worse music. Don't believe me? Boot up the Castlevania Advanced Collection and play Harmony of Dissonance, which is a great game, but only when you play it on mute. But what M2 and Konami have done is update the soundtrack, and it's been done very lovingly, and it's some beautiful orchestration and updating of the soundtrack, and it just sounds fantastic. As far as the sound effects go, oh, just check out the sound of that whip. Oh yeah, it's the best whip sound effect in a Castlevania game so far. So when I did my Nintendo Direct video, I did criticize this game for having Haunted Castle, and for good reasons. Advanced Collection had Dracula X on it, and it was like, Konami's going to do this for the future game collections. Here are your more modern Castlevania games, plus a crappy 2D game. I didn't see the remake on it, and now after playing this, I can't say you did a good job, M2 and Konami. This is a good game and a worthy addition and a great bonus to a really great collection. Is it worth $25 just for this remake? No. But take a look at what you're getting in the rest of this collection. Dawn of Sorrow, a game that is easily better than Symphony of the Night, and Portrait of Ruin, a game that's not as good as Symphony, but still worth playing. And then Order of Ecclesia. How can I describe this one? If Haunted Castle and Dracula X are Mega Man X6 and X7 of the Castlevania series, then Ecclesia is the X3. It's not a terrible game, nor is it a game I hate, but I haven't had much interest in really replaying it ever since I got it 16 years ago. And it has too much stuff to collect, and it's really hard to boot. So it really is the Mega Man X3 of the DS Castlevanias. But anyways, when you got those two really great games, plus you throw this Haunted Castle Revisited into the collection, and I have to say you really do get your money's worth out of this new Castlevania collection, and I haven't even really touched the DS ports yet. So yeah, good job Konami on this remake. Anyways, guys, that's it for this video. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below. Please leave a like and subscribe. It helps the channel. My name's Tommy the Game Master. I'll see you guys later. Bye.